everyone. So we are here tonight. We are on here tonight just for you to meet Kwanza Gipson. If you don't already know how awesome and amazing she is, this is who we are talking to tonight. Kwanza is one of our special guests for the Serenity Women's Writing Retreat in April. If you're not signed up, I don't know what you're waiting on, women. Let's go. Few spaces left. But Kwanza is one of our amazing presenters. I can't wait to share the gift of Kwanza with you guys. I think Kwanza is someone that I hold very, very dear. Like, she is one of my favorite people in the world. And so the fact that she stepped up, and when she heard about the retreat, she said, I would like, if you need anything, let me know. I hopped in her inbox immediately. Like, if she is willing to come and pour into the guests of the Serenity Women's Writing Retreat, oh my God, how phenomenal. And so thank you for taking the time to talk with us on this evening, Kwanza. I just wanted the guests to be able to meet you, and I want them to, hear a little bit about your writing journey and like what inspires you to write. But we'll start with your writing journey. So if you want to share a little bit about you and your writing journey, we'll just start there.
Sure, absolutely. I always say that, one, I have an absolute love for words, and I not really blame my dad, but I thank my father for, my mother always would share a story about, I was a little baby and I would be in a crib sucking on a pacifier, and my dad would be reading, she would say encyclopedia-sized books. And I would just sit there looking as if I understood everything that he was saying. So I think he has planted in me just this love of words and what words can do and how just communication in general. But I think words specifically, and how you can use them and pull them together to tell a story, to express yourself. I just think it's fascinating. And I think we do not use words wisely. We can just happen to the scripture, it says life and death is in the power of the tongue. And so that should give us an idea of how important words are. And so to have a respect for words, I think, and, on top of having a love for words, I think that's where my writing journey began. And then I can remember just as a little girl, always writing. I never really delved into poetry, like seriously. But I can remember as a little kid writing, poetry or just writing stories. So many fond memories of just me as a kid and just this fascination and just knowing that I always wanted to be a writer. So when people say I always know what I wanted to do, that's one of those things that just since I was a kid that always stuck with me. And gratefully, I had one of my aunts, who's one of my favorite aunts, I guess I can say that, but she's always been a mentor to me as well. And I remember sharing with her, this feeling of wanting to be a writer. And she actually, wrote poetry and things like that, had published a book on poetry. And I remember she was kind of one of the first people that I think kind of took serious the fact that I wanted to be a writer and kind of invested some research knowledge into me. So I remember she had created this list she pulled together this list, and this is before we really had Google and all that stuff. This was back in, must have been maybe 97.
Wow.
She pulled together this list for me of publishers. And I was working on my first book, No Greater Love, which is somewhere up here. Yeah, it's up there. Okay. So I was working on my first book, No Greater Love. And I remember this list of publishers that she had sent to me probably 2 years prior to that. And there's this whole story, I don't know if I have time to share it, but this whole story around how I was, seeking a publisher. First of all, seeking an agent, because back then, you couldn't just really approach a publisher. You had to go through an agent and go through this whole thing. And, a lot of the publishing houses they didn't accept what they call unsolicited work, which was work that didn't, have representation. Right. And I remember running into a friend. She's a friend of mine on Facebook now, a friend that I work with. She was going to a book club meeting, and the author was going to be there. And I don't know if I can say the author's name because I didn't but she's a friend of mine on Facebook as well. She said no.
I don't mind.
Well, I don't know if she, I'm sure she wouldn't mind. Candace Dow, she's like a local Baltimore author. Yeah, phenomenal woman. And I remember my friend Regina, who actually was the one who talked me into getting Sister Locks as well. She has helped me make some of my best life decisions. I think I owe her. But she was going to a friend's house who was hosting Candace for one of her book readings. And I can't remember the name of the book, so I apologize. And she was like, oh, I know you love to write, you should come. I was like, sure. So long story short, I go to the book reading. And I was working on No Greater Love at the time. And I remember, sitting next to Candace and, I'm a writer, she's like, oh, really? Like, what have you written, And so I started sharing with her this book that I was writing. And she was like, I'd love to read it. And I was like, absolutely. So I, sent her, I think at that time I may have had maybe the first chapter finished, like it was not really flushed out,
Right.
So I sent her that first chapter, and it must have been, if I can put on my memory really quickly, I feel like it was like the last Tuesday or something in September. Whatever that year was. And at this point, it probably was like 97 or 98 rather. And I remember sending her, just sending her the first chapter. Mm-hmm. And she immediately came back probably before the end of that week and was like, oh, I love it. Do you have more? And I was like, yeah, absolutely, And so I sent her, was like pulling all night, typing up more chapters. Mm-hmm. So I sent her the first 3 chapters, so 2 additional chapters. And she was like, I love this. Do you mind if I share this with my agent? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, I would love if you shared that with your agent. And she did. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, that was probably the last week of September, rather. So probably that following Tuesday, which I think was maybe like October the 2nd, she was like, that's when she was like, she wanted to share with her agent. I was like, absolutely. Her agent reached back to me, probably within days of her sharing those first 3 chapters. And I was so excited, Kimberly. I'm a woman of faith. So I was like, Lord, you better do what you do, because this is this is my testimony. So I was so incredibly excited, because you always hear people having these chance meetings that just turn into something amazing. And, I thought this was my chance meeting to turn into something amazing. So she shared it with her agent. And her agent was like, do you have any more chapters? And I was like, absolutely. So I was like knocking out chapters like it was nobody's business. And I ended up finishing the book because I wanted to finish it by the end of the year. So now we're into October. So by December 31st, I was like, finished the book. So I wrote this book in 3 months just to get it to her. And I got it to her by the end of the year. And, I was waiting for her to, waiting to hear back from her. And it must have been in February that following year, she came to me and she was like, I enjoyed reading it, but I just don't know what to do with it. And I'm like, what do you mean? Just publish it. Like, what do you just
publish it?
Ship it around and get a publisher and publish it,
Easy, right?
Right. But she was just kind of like, I just don't know what to do. And I never forget, I was in my closet and I was cleaning out my pocketbooks. And I had just come across the list that my aunt had sent me a couple of years earlier. So that's why that part was significant. I literally was in it, cleaning out my pocketbooks in my closet when my phone rang. It was the agent. I picked it up and she was just kind of like, I'm not quite sure what to do with it. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what to do with it? Like, I was like, man, so I was very gracious on the phone. Like, well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your feedback. And, she's just like, keep doing what you, that little, little charge, keep going, And when I got that phone, I cried so hard. And I was just like, Lord, why? Like, why would you get my emotions up so high?
Right.
And it just felt so real, and back then it was just different. I tell writers now, like the engagement that you can have with a publisher right now is unlike anything that we've done, before. Right. And so I hung up the phone with her and I kind of cried and asked the Lord, why me, Lord? And then I remembered I had just finished a book and I can't even, I apologize. I can't remember no author's name. I can't remember half the people's name, but I had just finished this book and it was a husband and wife duo. That wrote this really beautiful book and it was more faith-based and I had never seen anything like that. And so when she said that she didn't know what to do with it, like the Holy Spirit just really put in my spirit that this was more aligned with faith-based. Yeah. And back then, you know, it was a lot of like that urban, you know, urban fiction.
Yeah.
Which, you know, No Greater Love didn't really, I mean, it taps into, but not in the way that, you know, your other authors was doing. Yeah. And so it was just different. And so when the Holy Spirit was like, this is different, when she said it was different, and her Holy Spirit confirmed that it was different. And I remember I had just finished this book and it was literally still sitting on my nightstand. And so I opened the book and I immediately looked to see who their agent was. And lo and behold, and I apologize again, can't remember anybody's name, but lo and behold, the agent was actually listed on the list of agents that my aunt has sent me a couple of years earlier. So I'm like, this can't be a coincidence. So at that point I go and I don't know if I Googled her or what did they have before Google? It was something else.
Look, I don't know what came before Google.
What was it? Oh my gosh. But it wasn't Google though, but I kind of looked her up online. And at that point she had started her own publishing house. And her publishing house was, geez, Walkworthy Press.
Okay.
Walkworthy Press. And it's important that I remember. That's why I'm like, I need to remember.
Right.
But it was a Walkworthy Press and it was a Christian publishing house. And I was like, okay, God, you know. So it wasn't, what I love about how God works, at least for me, is that it's always that elevation. It's always like, okay, come up. You know, like I could have given you that like that, but I need you to come up. And so it's like, oh man, so he really just expanded my mind with regards to, you know, writing and publishing, and then really taking to heart like the importance of words. Because I would always say, like, I want to write something that my grandmother can read. Because my grandma was just so important to me.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, went through all of the, you know, you had to send out the query letter, and, you know, because she was just starting a publishing house, she was taking, you know, letters directly from authors. Okay. And so I, you know, filled out the query letter, did all the things that they were asking for. And one of the things that they wanted was I think the first 3 chapters, I think. No, the synopsis. Ooh, Lord, that every time I say that word, it gives me because that was a chore. I mean, I had written this book in 3 months, and No Greater Love is at least 200 and some odd pages.
Yeah.
I've written this book in 3 months, and I could not write a synopsis to save my life.
It's not as easy as some people might think. People really struggle with the synopsis.
I must have I wrestled with that synopsis for probably about 7 months. And yeah, I was like, I can't do this. So I never sent it. But what happened was I got the awareness and the understanding that there was such a thing as Christian fiction. And so I went back and kind of started revisiting No Greater Love and just really, you know, tightening it up.
Yeah.
And so that's what I ended up doing, you know, tightening it up. And then, you know, because God is so amazing, it was, you know, I remember driving down the highway and he said First Fruits Publishing. And I was like, what is that? Right. Yeah. And so then he, you know, just kind of started downloading like the direction and the instructions. And so I published not just my book, but several other authors under what was previously my publishing house, First Fruits Publishing. And I think I kind of changed the focus of that back in 2019. So, you know, so I you know, ended up doing the self-publishing approach for No Greater Love. And it was the best experience. It really was the best experience ever. I always say that, you know, for me, again, with God always elevating you. So for me, I seen within me an author, but God seen a publisher. And I always appreciate that because, you know, we're looking to, a lot of times we look to try to get at someone else's table or for somebody to be the plug, you know, but God was like, no, you're the plug. And
I love it.
The rest is history. So I think I took 20 minutes just to give you that.
No, that was great though. And I might say No Greater Love is a really great book. I really enjoyed that too. I remember that. Yeah. And like I said, it's up there on my shelf too. Yeah. You know, but I really, my favorite piece of work of yours, I have it right here.
Oh,
I want you to talk a little bit about Reflections of a Life Well Lived, because
Yeah.
I so enjoyed this. And you are such an amazing storyteller.
Oh,
And
thank
so,
you.
and I told you that when I was reading, when you were sending me
Yes.
people and stuff, I just so enjoyed it. And I love the way, like you said, you have a way with words. You have this gift with words in the way that you tell a story that just made reading it such an amazing experience. So talk about that.
Yeah. So of course, Reflections of a Life Well Lived is the book that I actually published just on the top of the pandemic. I think I had my my book release. I literally had my book release on February 29th. Right. Did my book release on February 29th of 2020. Mm-hmm. And then we were into in a pandemic. But with no greater,
we didn't have masks on at the release, right? It was before all that.
Yeah, we did not, because it literally was like that week,
right
and
before.
then every all heck broke loose.
Yes, literally.
But
literally,
yes. But with Reflections of a Life Well Lived, I always knew, and this I love that book so much because it is personal. So in between No Greater Love and the Reflections of a Life Well Lived was according to your faith be it unto you. Mm-hmm. And I have to kind of start there a little bit, because with that book, I remember, like, it was one thing writing fiction because the characters are completely made up. But when I did according to your faith, it was really me kind of sharing my journey, in my faith, and just kind of, really talking about faith as it is, not just, Christianity, but faith, the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. Like, what does faith look like, and, realize. And I remember sharing like little tidbits about my life. And I remember coming out of church one day and this girl was like, "Oh, I read your book. Oh my God, I feel like I know you so much more." And I felt completely naked and vulnerable. I did not like how that felt. So kind of like, okay, let me get back to fiction. Because it was something about that, really being vulnerable that, I don't know, I just didn't like it. I don't know.
I understand completely.
Yeah. And so to, fast forward a few years later, where God is kind of like, okay, Reflections of a Life Well Lived. And I tell you, that book went through so many iterations because, of course, you have girlfriend therapy ministry. And so I thought for sure that it was going to be like an extension of girlfriend therapy. And I think, some of the earlier titles was, girlfriend therapy, Reflections of a Life Well Lived, or something like that. It purposely ended up taking off the girlfriend therapy piece, because I felt like people were going to expect it to be more ministry focused. Mm-hmm. And I remember just like really making that conscious decision that I wanted to be completely vulnerable. And I shared things in there that I had never shared. I shared about being in a, domestically abusive or dating violence. I don't know what I call it, domestic violence, but dating violence. I shared stories about that. Just a lot of really personal stories about my life. And I thought it was so purpose, because I just knew that there was a shift that was happening, not just within my life, but just like within ministry and everything. So that book for me was kind of like a moment in time where, if you think about marking time, that book for me marked a moment in time. And then, so now on the other side of that, there's this whole other story that's being developed, which I'm excited about, right? And excited to see where it goes. But with Reflections of a Life Well Lived, I mean, there's a lot of, personal stories, a lot of fun stories. It just kind of lays the gamut, and it talks, what I really appreciate about that is the vulnerability that I have when I talk about ministry and my experience with regards to ministry. Because it was like it was a really, really interesting journey for me. And then really taking back like the authenticity of who I am in ministry. Because I remember like early on, I think I shared even, from a conference that I was doing, where I felt like, a lot of people, they have like this, this energy around them, or this bravado, and you get women and they screaming and kicking their shoes off, and, got the whole makeup thing going, and,
lashes falling off,
right. Exactly. It was a lot, but that wasn't me, and that wasn't how I how I moved in ministry, and even within messages. And so I always kind of felt like on the outside to some degree on the outside of what was happening and, the charismatic churches and, and this isn't about the conversation, but just, talking about the book and just the clickiness of the church, right? And not just when you're talking about specific denominations, but within the church itself, if you're a part of a particular congregation, it can feel very cliquish. And that for me was really off-putting, and it was a turn off. And because I know early in my ministry, girlfriend therapy is not affiliated with any church. And I know early in the ministry, when God said girlfriend therapy ministry, a lot of people was like, well, who are you under? Who called you? What are you?
My God called me.
It was a lot. I mean, I couldn't even get people to come like, oh, can you come and do praise and worship? Can you come and speak? And it's like, well, who are you under? Who's covering you? What's a da-da-da? Woo. Yeah. Child, you got to take me back to a moment.
I remember. I remember having this conversation.
Yeah. It was a lot. And so to be able to really dig, to be able to pour those emotions out on a page, and not in a way to poke the church in the eye, but just in a very vulnerable way to say, had it not been for my faith, and had it not been for me just really understanding what God has called me to do, a lot of the ministers and the, Christians that I had encountered just through ministry. I'm not talking about, anything else. I'm talking about doing ministry, doing the work and will of God. Just some of the people that I had encountered, had I not been anchored in my faith in the way that I was, or the way that I am, it would have really been off-putting. And so I feel like I survived that, praise God. I survived, people's opinions and people's expectations, and even the rejection, so I survived all of that. And I'm grateful for, friends like you, grateful for, under girlfriend therapy, I have a board, and my spiritual mentor, who's been a mentor to me since I was a baby in Christ, just people who've really walked this journey with me for many, many years, even before, the public facing ministry, just helping to grow me up in the faith. And, I'm just grateful for that. I don't know if that had anything to do with, according to
it's all about this and what you wrote in Reflection of a Life Well Lived, which is why I love it so much. It's got pictures and everything, guys. It's
and I had some of my art in it as well.
Yes. Oh, yes. I just flipped past it. Wait a minute. She has some of her art in there because she's an artist as well, guys.
Yes. Try to put all that in there. But I think that book as well. One of the things I know for sure is I always think about, like, when I become, when I'm no longer here, right? There's something that can say, this is who I was. And this
book actually does that well.
Oh,
I mean, it really does. So I really think you accomplished what you set out to do with that. When you were telling me about your vision for it, because it's so well written.
Amen. Thank you so much.
That if you were no longer here, I could go back and say, and read a story and laugh the way you make me laugh, and just hear your voice through your words, because I could really, like, reading it. It's like I could hear your voice, which is good, because that's like what you're gonna be talking about, right?
Exactly.
So, anyway, but I could hear, when I was reading it, I could hear your voice in the words. So that was really, really powerful. So I just love it. I just love it. And so I think you may have touched on this anyway, but what inspires you to write now, currently? What is inspiring you to write?
I think it is for me, I think with each project, there was this different inspiration. And I think that's natural. I think I think you should have something that inspires every work, right? Everything that you write, there should be something that is being birthed out of. I know with Reflections, there were a couple of things. One, it was kind of that legacy piece where I wanted my children's children to be able to say, oh, my great grandma Kwanza did, so it was that part of it. The other part also, like I said, I felt like I was coming to, like, marking time. And so that was kind of like my marker. That was kind of like my marker for this time. And now there was something new on the other side of that. But then also I thought it was important to talk about people who were in my life that was no longer here. And I think that inspiration came from, I never forget, my husband and I, we were driving, we were going on vacation, and I had learned of a friend that I went to middle school with, and I had learned that she had passed. And I was like, and she had passed many years before I learned that she had passed. But so she was really young. You know, I had just learned that she had passed. I had just turned 40. So it was a lot going on, you know, at that time as well. And I remember Googling, like trying to find information about her, and nothing came up. And it was like, and I remember she was from it was like her mother, her and her brother. And they had, you know, really hard upbringing. Her brother had passed, her mother, like all of them had passed, like, you know. So there was nothing there to say that she existed.
Wow.
And that just, it did something for me. Like, I was like, I have to say her name in pages where if someone was to Google her name, you know, God willing, the chapter where she's mentioned in my book will come up, right? So I think that was a part of it as well. Just
beautiful.
Acknowledging, and not just her, but there's a chapter in there where I talk about my village, my tribe.
Your uncle.
I talk about my uncle.
I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. And interesting enough, Kimberly, since I've written that, I think at that time, I only have one uncle left. Actually, while I was writing that, one of my uncles had passed. My favorite uncle had passed. And that was, you know, I was in the middle of writing that chapter. So it really was kind of like paying homage as well to people who have just poured into my life and meant something to me just in my, you know, in my journey. So I mentioned like neighbors that I grew up with, like Miss Drake, who's like the village guru. She's just like, just this amazing woman that I think Miss Drake is probably, her kids will probably see this, but I think she's probably like 97 maybe.
Oh, wow.
But I don't even know if she's 97, so I apologize if it's not. But she's just an amazing figure in our community and has always been like very much about the community. So to call her name out in my book was important to me. Miss Smith, who was, you know, a neighbor that lived down the street. And I remember falling into her. She had like this little prickly little cactus plant. And I remember falling into her cactus plant, and her son and I were like best friends. You know, my mom would share the story about him pushing me down. He's probably going to see this and be like, no, she's not telling it. But he pushed me down. Right. But he like pushed me down the steps when I was a kid, like not on purpose. I think he was playing and I would always laugh. And I ended up rolling down the steps in the inner city concrete steps in my walker. I would always blackmail him, be like, no, you need to give me that. Because remember, you almost killed me when I was a baby, you know. But just calling out like Miss Lucy, who, you know, she gave me the nickname Cookie Monster. So it was just really important just calling the names of people who meant something to me. You know, Miss Rogers, I, you know, would knock on her door at like, you know, 5 years old, like, can you come out? Like, and she was like a grown woman. And she,
I remember reading about that. Oh my God.
Exactly. And she would indulge me and, you know, come out and sit on the porch and just pour wisdom into me. And, you know, you don't really find communities like that.
Unfortunately.
And that was like, I mean, a very, very important part of who I am today is like my family, you know, my village. They're instrumental in, you know, in who I am.
That's awesome. Wow. See, guys, this is why I just love her. This is so great. And guys, I'm talking to Kwanza Gipson here. She is one of our presenters for the Serenity Women's Writing Retreat that is coming up on April the 8th through the 11th. The 8th through the 11th of April 2022. If you want to get more information about it, www.laboopublishing.com/events. It's right there on the page. If you need more info, you can inbox me however you want to do it. But if you want to join us, we'd love to have you. It's a very small event, you know, intimate, because I want people to be able to soak all this in. It's going to be just such a beautiful atmosphere. The presenters, all of you, I mean, just have such beautiful spirits. And so our attendees are going to be absolutely blessed. And so that's why I wanted to take the time out. I introduced you, you know, with your picture and everything, saying that you're one of our presenters, but I wanted them to get to see you, hear from you, and know, you know, who they're going to be meeting at the retreat. So it's so awesome. So we're getting ready to wrap up, but I do want you to tell them a little bit about what you plan to share at the retreat.
So the workshop that I'll be doing is about the writer's voice. Again, talking about words and just how impactful and piercing and important it is, one, to understand your voice as a writer, so that you can, again, going back to that authenticity, so that you can write from a real authentic place. And readers understand it, and they feel it, they hear it, they fill in the gap as far as like, what is it that you're saying? I always talk about there's a rhythm to writing, so I'll talk about that in my workshop as well. And people that read a lot, I think you understand that. So no matter how large the book is, one of my favorite books, I don't see it near where I can reach it, but one of my favorite books is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. And when I tell you that book, at least the edition that I have, it has to be over 500 pages. And it is almost 500 pages of poetry. And so when you read it and you understand how he writes, and I'll share some of that with you guys as well, because I think his writings, Ralph Ellison's writing style for me in particular, is just absolutely beautiful. He is hands down one of my favorite authors ever. Wow. All times. And Invisible Man is the most beautiful piece of work, I think, from a writing and rhythm perspective, that I've ever read. And so, talking and sharing with your, with the attendees, just understanding their voice, learning their voice, being comfortable with their voice, because a lot of times what we tend to do, I think as novice writers as well, is try to sound like someone that we've read. And so you start trying to take on, something that's just not you, you may look at, you may look at, like Toni Morrison. She's another one that I enjoy. And I think I enjoy her story more than I enjoy her writing. And some people will probably be like, what are you talking about? But I think she's phenomenal just as a storyteller. And then I think her path, if you think about just how she started as a writer and just the trajectory of what she's done with her life. So, when she, passed a few years ago, I actually did a drawing of her, because she was one of those that I think just had a phenomenal career as a writer, and just kind of showed the different directions that you can go into. And so, so just want to share with them just the importance of understanding your voice and understanding it early, and trusting it. Not being afraid of it, I think about Terry McMillan, I think it was, and I can't remember which book it was, I have to look it up. But I remember one of her books, it was probably maybe her third or fourth, fifth book or something. And she started the book off, if you're capturing like a Southern accent, and it was very choppy, so if you think about how it's perceived that people, it spoke maybe back during slavery days. So but it was really choppy, and people were like, I can't read this. This is a mess, Oh, wow. You remember that book? I can't remember which one it is. I have to look it up. But I remember her response to it was, well, don't read it. It's like, if you can't catch the rhythm, then don't read it. And just imagine the confidence that it takes, especially, here she is with this big publishing house. And a lot of times when you're working with publishers, they don't necessarily give you the space to embrace your voice, but they try to fit you into some kind of niche market. And so and so for her to kind of really stay authentic to her voice, I thought was phenomenal. And I thought it was really phenomenal. And so it takes courage, and to not take for granted the power that every writer has in telling a story in the way that is authentic to them. Like, there's power in that. So I'm looking forward to, kind of sharing that with with the ladies at the retreat as well.
I'll be taking notes too. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
That is so awesome. So thank you so much. Like, this wasn't intended to be long. Like I said, I just wanted our guests that are joining us for the retreat to be able to, meet you, experience you before they experience you for real. On here this evening. So thank you so much for taking the time out, because I know you are a busy woman as well. Absolutely. And so thank you so much for doing this. To our viewers again, Kwanza Gipson, she'll be joining us at the Serenity Women's Writing Retreat in April of 2022, April 8th through the 11th in Cambridge, Maryland. We have a big, phenomenal house that we're going to be in. And so I'm just so looking forward to it, and so looking forward to being able to share this beautiful woman of God with you guys, for her to be able to pour into you. So thank you so much for joining us on tonight. Thank you, Kwanza, for joining us. And guys, we'll catch you with the next guest. All right. Take care. Be blessed, everyone. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.